The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Is April 3rd, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have as our special guest, Joe Setyon. He is the communication manager at the Goldwater Institute that is located in Arizona, I believe. And, they take on cases and fight for liberty, for us in both Arizona and across the country. So let's jump right into it. And James, our invisible hand, if we could get the visual, there we go. So this is the page for the Goldwater Institute. And I guess I'm going to hand it over at this point to you, Joe, and you can maybe tell us and our guests a little bit about what it is that you guys do and what your mission is over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the Goldwater Institute, and first, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's really great to be here. At the Goldwater Institute, our mission is to empower Americans to live their lives the way they see fit. So we fight in courtrooms, Capitol buildings, and communities across the country to do just that. We pass laws, and then we go to bat to people who are facing, government tyranny, and we defend them in court. And we pass policies that, in economic liberty, in defending taxpayers, in school choice, education, healthcare, occupational licensing, that will just empower more people to pursue their own American dream.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds great. And you guys being in Arizona, we like to always share whenever anybody is coming from a specific region, how sort of that area is doing with liberty. And so since you guys are in Arizona, we thought we'd just pull up the Cato map real quick. And Cato, or rather Arizona, is ranked by Cato as ninth out of 50 states toward liberty. So you guys are definitely doing pretty good there. And here they sort of track you guys over time until the most recent one. So, sounds like, whatever you guys are doing over there in Arizona, it must be working.
Thank you. Well, yeah, we're working hard. I mean, we just passed last year the gold standard for school choice in the nation. We passed the nation's lowest flat tax rate of 2.5%. In 2019, we passed a first in the nation occupational licensing reform. That means out-of-state workers moving to the state can get quickly back to work based on their out-of-state training. So we're working hard every day in Arizona to make it one of the freest states in the nation, and we're proud of that work.
Would you say that's an example of when I think of legislation that increases liberty, I have a hard time coming up with examples because usually we're always fighting legislation that reduces liberty. So would you say that low tax rate was an example of legislation that increases liberty?
Absolutely. We think anytime we can put more money back into the pockets of hardworking taxpayers, that's a good thing. Obviously, yes, a lot of laws are things that decrease liberty, that put burdens on Americans just trying to live their lives. But if we can lower the tax rate and if we can make it so that people keep more of their hard-earned money, that's a good thing. And that empowers them to do what they want with that money rather than give it to the government.
All right.
Well, Joe, one of the questions we always like to ask anybody coming on the show, because the answer is always different, is how did you first discover a value for liberty? Because we certainly know it usually doesn't come from the government public school system.
No, that's a great question. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, which is about as far from Arizona as you can possibly imagine. So growing up, I didn't really know what liberty was. As you know, in New York, it's just full of regulations and bureaucrats and nothing gets done. There's government corruption rampant. And I kind of thought that was the way that things just were everywhere. You have no freedom. You have to ask the government's permission to just basically live your life. And it's not a great way to live. But eventually I realized, well, maybe there's a better way. I went to college out in Western Pennsylvania. I eventually moved out here to Phoenix, Arizona. And just studying all of these things and researching liberty, I realized New York is not the be all and end all. That's just the way they do things there. And it doesn't really work there because, again, you just have to ask the government's permission to do anything. And I realized, well, maybe if we just got the government out of people's lives, then they can pursue their American dream and they can succeed and they can be empowered to live, productive, successful lives.
So how did that lead you to the Goldwater Institute?
Yeah, so I said I went to college out in Western Pennsylvania, and I worked. After there, I decided it was just time for the next adventure. So I moved out to Arizona. I was working in conservative political journalism at the time, and eventually I decided, journalism maybe wasn't for me. But what I really, really, really liked was the other side of that, media relations, which is what I do now. In the middle of that time, I went to Washington, D.C., and I worked at Reason Magazine, which is a libertarian publication out there. D.C. wasn't really for me either, to be honest. But when I came back to Arizona, one of my old colleagues at Reason told my now boss, who was looking for someone to join their team, that Joe was out in Arizona and maybe he would be a good fit. I'd heard of the Goldwater Institute. They were founded in 1988, so they've been around for a little bit. But I looked more into them. I figured I'd love to work for these people. They're actually making a real difference. And I interviewed and I got the position, and I've loved it ever since.
Okay.
Well, as far as the Goldwater Institute goes, so you mentioned Reason, and certainly they're sort of a libertarian magazine. Are you guys kind of more conservative or libertarian there in the Goldwater? It's kind of a mix?
Yeah, so we'll have people who work with us who are conservative or libertarian, but really what we're about is freedom. We're not about politics. We're not about political labels. We're about getting the government out of people's lives and empowering them to live freer, happier lives. I know that isn't exactly an answer to your question, but I would say we're about liberty. We're not in any sort of political business. We're in the liberty business, and we've been in for about 35 years now, and we've been expanding liberty.
So you are making a distinction between liberty and freedom. Could you expand on that? I'm not sure that I quite understand the distinction you're making here.
Oh, well, I meant to, I may have misspoken, but I'm trying to say, we're in the freedom business. We're in the liberty business. And, there's a lot of labels flying around. We are a conservative group. But what we're really in, bigger than whether we're conservative or libertarian or kind of what sort of the difference between those two ideologies are, is we're in the freedom business. And I would use that interchangeably with liberty.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well, you mentioned, some of the different cases that your group has taken on to help defend people's liberties on. And so you talked about occupational licensing, school choice, and I think there was there's a few others that slipped my mind at the moment. But as far as those goes, what are some of the, what are a few examples of those recently that you guys have taken on?
Yeah, just to give you one that I'm pretty excited about right now, because excited is maybe the wrong term, but I feel very strongly about. We're defending a mother out in Maine, and this mother, her 13-year-old daughter went to public school, and at the public school, a social worker, a school counselor, was talking with the daughter who had questions about her gender identity, and the counselor gave the daughter a chest binder, which is something you use to flatten breasts. Now, this girl is only 13 years old. And what we're sort of taking issue here is with the school counselor told the girl that he wasn't going to tell her parents and that she didn't need to either. Really, in secret, this public school employee tried to hide this big question about her daughter's health from a mom, and we're defending her constitutional rights there. We just think that it's outrageous that in schools across the country, public schools are deliberately trying to keep things from parents. You have educators who think they know better than parents. They think they know how to raise children better than moms and dads are doing, and they're trying to usurp their role. We see that very tied into our work in school choice, where we say, well, we need to have academic transparency and we need to have school choice. Now, academic transparency says, look, parents have a right to know what their children are learning in public, taxpayer-funded schools. And for that reason, they should be publishing their curriculum content online. And parents shouldn't have to file public records requests just for questions about school safety or their children's health or things like that. And then we say, yeah, you publish your curriculum online, which is academic transparency, and then parents can actually make an informed choice about how they want their children to be educated. In the case of Amber Levine, who's the main mom I just talked about, the U.S. Supreme Court has found for the past 100 years that parents have a fundamental right to control the upbringing, education, and healthcare of their children. But they can't do that effectively if the government, public schools, are hiding information from them. And we think that's a big problem. And, we're going to bat for Amber, and we're working across the country to, stand up to these public schools that are trying to hide things from parents.
And James, hold on just a second, Leon. Our invisible hand, James, can you bring up the visual? I actually brought up the story here too, so our readers can see, or our viewers can see where that's at. So this is Amber Levine right here, who you guys are defending, it looks like. So
yeah, and Amber is not some sort of activist parent. She's not a political parent. She's just a concerned mom, and that's what we're seeing across the country. Is parents like Amber. Parents like Nicole Solis, who's another mom that we're defending out in Rhode Island. She wanted to know what her kindergartner was going to learn in school, and they wouldn't tell her. So she filed public records requests, and they told her it would cost $70 or I believe tens of thousands of dollars. And then as she kept trying to get answers, the nation's largest public sector teachers union sued her for trying to get answers. So this is not just outlier cases. This is a trend of, parents looking for answers, trying to find out what is going on in their children's school, and the schools trying to hide it from them.
So in these cases, in the main case and in the Rhode Island case, are you guys suing the school district?
So in the Rhode Island case, we are defending Nicole, as she is facing a lawsuit from the National Education Association's Rhode Island chapter. And then in the main case, the most recent development there is we sent a letter to the school board telling them, look, one, you need to investigate what happened here. And two, you need to adopt a new policy that stops keeping parents in the dark, that informs them when important things like these are happening. And we have not filed a lawsuit yet, but, all options are on the table in terms of litigation. And yeah.
Okay.
Just curious, Joe, how do you guys select the case? I mean, does somebody like Amber reach out to you guys and say, hey, I've got this horrible situation here and I'm looking for some legal help? Or do you guys sort of, scan the news and see, where the need is and then go and try and contact the person who's in trouble?
Well, it's a mixture of both of those things, but we absolutely encourage, parents or anyone whose rights have been violated by the government to reach out to us. We have a submit a case page, and we look through that regularly, and that's where a lot of our cases do come from.
Okay.
We had a just as an example of that. We work a lot in civil asset forfeiture, which is where the government will steal your property if they think that the property was used to commit wrongdoing. However, there's no due process. There's no being convicted of a crime. And in many cases, they're not even accusing you of a crime. Now, we defended a grandmother out in Massachusetts who the police took her car for 6 years and they kept it. They never accused her of a crime. They never charged her with a crime. She was never convicted. And, we got involved and, very quickly, they realized they had no choice but to give her car back. And then I believe two of our other clients in the civil asset forfeiture realm saw either that case or saw some of our civil asset forfeiture work, and they were facing a similar problem. They were entrepreneurs. They had $17,000 that they were using for their dog breeding business, and the government took that, accused them of drug trafficking with absolutely no evidence, and they were going to keep the money. And these sisters found out about us. They submitted a case, and they got in contact with our attorney. We took the case, and we got them their money back.
In the case of the sisters, was that a cash seizure?
It was a cash seizure, yes.
It was cash. Okay.
Yeah, it seems just amazing, the landscape of things nowadays that, things that you wouldn't have even thought of as real, 20 years ago. The idea that a public school would be doing things like telling your kid that maybe they're a different gender and then not wanting to tell you about it afterwards, or the idea of just, coming and seizing your cash and then telling you, okay, well, we have a case. I guess, how does that work? Is it usually the case is against the cash and then you have to go defend the cash? Is that how it works? Or do you defend the person to get their cash back? Because I've heard it's kind of weird the way I guess the way the charge works on these civil asset forfeitures.
Yeah, so civil asset forfeiture laws are different in every state. In this California case, with those two sisters who are entrepreneurs, under California law, they really needed to show something, and they didn't. They were sort of trying to use the law, which says technically, you need a conviction in order to keep the money, but they were really trying to drag out the process and use every loophole they could to use it. And you sort of see there's no one way people try to do this, but in different states, the government will try to use whatever they can to trample on people's rights.
Yeah. It seems a little more understandable in some of these cases where they charge a person and the person is once they're found guilty and then they say, oh, this is gotten by ill-gotten means, so it's maybe not yours anymore. But the idea that before you're even found guilty, then, well, this just isn't yours until you prove it's yours.
Yeah, I mean, the onus of proving a crime should be on the government. You shouldn't have to prove, You shouldn't have to lose your money and then try to prove something to get it back. The government is supposed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you violated the law before it takes your stuff.
Yeah, I think they call it due process or something.
Yes. A little something our founders knew about.
Yeah,
just
not only they knew about, but they inserted it into our constitution. So that little nappy little thing there that we're supposed to pay attention to.
Yeah,
that's one of those things that us weirdo libertarians cling on to for some reason.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I wonder why.
Well, it's funny, in some of these Caesar asset forfeiture cases, it literally almost sounds like highway robbery. Like I've heard of cases in Texas and other places where you're just driving through, they pull you over, they find out you have cash, they take the cash, but they let you go.
It's very unfortunate.
That's what it is.
Because you have to realize the average cash seizure is less than the amount it's going to take to hire a lawyer. So, in many of these cases, you hire a lawyer and you'll get your cash back, but it's going to cost more than you lost. So for a lot of people, it's not even worth it. So the government just gets to use to keep the money because, maybe somebody doesn't have thousands of dollars to hire an attorney and get it back. That's why, groups like Goldwater are out there giving pro bono legal services, but, we need to change the system. And that's what we're trying to do. We passed a law in Arizona in 2021 that requires a conviction before the police take your money. And we think that's a big development. And we're working, both on the policy landscape and on the litigation landscape to defend people against civil asset forfeiture.
All right. Well, there's another example of using a law to increase freedom, although it's kind of full circle back to don't you normally have to convict somebody of something before you take their stuff?
Right.
Which is a punishment. It's a punishment. Taking your stuff, your private property, that's a punishment. At least when I grew up, at St. John's Catholic School, that was considered a punishment. You took your money, your lunch money, or whatever. So there you go. Anyway, yeah, why not?
No, it absolutely is a punishment, and the government is supposed to punish you when you commit a crime, not when you haven't done anything wrong.
Right. Yeah, and they have to prove it. Not only, you don't even have to prove that you didn't commit it. They just have to prove it that you did.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, too. Yes.
Which goes back to the old rule of law thing, and all that stuff that we cling to.
And that perky little thing known as due process.
As due process, exactly. That's the words I was thinking of.
Well, Joe, you talked about a lot of different things you guys have done there at Goldwater. What's the biggest thing that stands out that you guys are most proud of, that you guys have, your biggest success, I guess, over there?
I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to give you two things, if that's okay. Yeah, and I'll keep it short.
Sure.
I talked about
do you have 3 or 4? I mean,
if I go past 2, then we're going to be here all day. But, back in 2011, we created this policy called education savings accounts. And what that said was parents can get the money that would otherwise be spent on their child's public education, and they can use that money to customize their child's education in a way that best meets their unique needs, whether that's private schooling, homeschooling, a co-op, something like that. And we passed this in Arizona, and we've been expanding it ever since. At first, it was only for certain students. And then last year, we expanded it to every student in the state. It was the biggest victory for school choice ever in the country, because we said, any parent who wants it is not going to be confined to sending their child to the school that, is assigned to their zip code. So we expanded that to every student in the state. Now in Arizona, any family that wants it can have school choice under this innovative program that we come up with. The cool thing is that other states have now followed suit. ESAs are now a reality, universal ESAs. So universal school choice is now a reality in Iowa, Utah, Florida. Just last week, Governor DeSantis signed that into law.
Yes.
And Arkansas, where Governor Sanders also signed that into law last month. We're really proud of that because, we created this program, and now we're seeing it like a domino effect. And with every state, it's more children that are not confined to a school just because of their zip code. We're really, really happy with that. Universal school choice is becoming a reality in state after state after state. And we're just very, very, very happy with that. Now, the other thing, if I may, that we're really pleased about is the right to try. So under, the federal government and the FDA's outdated regulatory framework, back before we came up with this policy, terminally ill patients had to beg the FDA's permission to access drugs that were not yet FDA approved, but that could save their life, experimental drugs. And unfortunately, terminally ill patients do not have time to do this. It was very sad and it was very tragic. So we came up with this law, right to try, and it said, look, you have the right to try to save your own life. You can access experimental drugs without begging the government for permission first. And we passed this at the state level in more than 40 states. And then in 2018, Congress passed it and President Trump signed it into law. And, that's one of our biggest victories, one of the big things we're proud of. And now I mentioned right to try because now we're expanding it with something called the right to try for individualized treatments. Today, the most innovative treatments for critically ill Americans are personalized, based on their specific genes. They're things like gene therapy. And what the right to try for individualized treatments does is it extends, the original right to try so that patients don't have to wait all this time to access drugs that are tailor-made for them. You can't have clinical trials with a drug that is tailor-made for a specific person. And so this is going to help people who are critically ill, who need treatment, get it without asking the government for permission. We passed this first last year in Arizona, and now we're working to promote it across the country.
Wow.
If I may quickly go back to the school choice issue that you're speaking about, I understand that your governor, who I believe is a woman by the name of Katie Hobbs, is attempting to dismantle that universal school choice that you guys passed. Is that going anywhere, or is that campaign bluster?
No, she has said that, she wants to dismantle it, but yeah, it's bluster. She can't. This is law, and she cannot just unilaterally dismantle the program. And we're very confident in that. And if she tries to do it, we're confident that the program will stand up.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, she took a page from our governor over here in California. It's like, I can unilaterally do whatever I want, but anyway.
But she can't. No one can unilaterally do whatever they want.
Well, it's funny with the whole FDA thing. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, the idea that, hey, it's your body. You should be able to take whatever risk you want to take with your own body. But what we recently saw with COVID was, they were willing to sort of bypass all of the FDA things to force an experimental thing on little kids who didn't even seem to maybe need it, I guess, a vaccine. And so it just seems kind of oddball. But that did bring me to a question that has COVID changed sort of the challenges that you guys are seeing? And we're starting to get close to the end of the show too. So if you wanted to bring any of that up and any final thoughts as well that you wanted to share with the organization.
I think what we saw during COVID, and especially with those lockdowns, is that, once the government takes power, it's difficult to get it back, or it's difficult for it to give it up willingly. And I think what we saw is, the government implemented these lockdowns. It told people that you can't run a business or leave your house in many places. And in some places it was a lot worse than others. And I think that sets a very, very troubling precedent. And it has set a troubling precedent because I think a lot of governments think, if you did that, then, why not take it steps further? And so I think that's the challenge we're facing there. And it just means that the government is not going to try. I think what I wanted to mention is just that's the biggest challenge facing liberty today. And COVID only compounded this, is that we have these statists, these people who think they can run your life better than you can. And they're not going to stop. They're not giving up. They want control, and they think that they can have it. And, COVID only compounded this, and we have to keep fighting. But it is worth it, is the thing I really want to emphasize. Defending liberty takes a lot of work.
Well, and that sounds like a great place to leave it on. And we're so thankful that you could join us today, Joe. And we hope you guys keep up the good work at the Goldwater Institute. And thanks for our audience for joining us. And until the next one, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.